I once traveled to Tel Aviv for a speaking event. I was warned that by going to Israel, I would not be allowed to enter many other countries. In fact, there are many countries, I don't know the exact number, I think more than a dozen, that will refuse you entry if they find out you have ever been to Israel. And now we have today's story, which is seemingly drawing a lot of controversy. Rashida Tlaib, initially denied entry along with Ilhan Omar, was then approved to enter after she sent a heartfelt letter saying she wanted to see her grandmother, who is 90 years old, so they could pick figs, I believe. Upon the approval, she then said, "No, I refuse." And there's a lot of back and forth. I think there are some good points in defense of Rashida Tlaib's position, although I do think it's kind of absurd to make a humanitarian request and then when they approve it, kind of deny it. Which leads me to believe that I think Rashida Tlaib may have been expecting to get rejected and wanted to make a point. That's just my opinion, okay? I know this is a very complicated issue. The reason I bring up the issue about going to Israel is that, look, there's a conflict happening. It's been happening for a long time between Israel, Palestine, the Arab world. Whatever side you fall on, there are people who are very heated in terms of their political position on this. I am not one who knows nearly enough to get involved in what any of this means. But I can say that even if you are in a position where you want to see your grandmother, like Rashida Tlaib, I think the way she went about it is not making anything better. It's actually making everything worse. If her goal was to bring peace, then everything she's done has actually hurt that process. And so that's what we'll talk about today. And I want to start by going straight to the statement from the Israeli Interior Minister. Now, I can't read Hebrew, and the translation is pretty bad, but we have Jake Sherman, who's Politico Playbook, NBC News, MSNBC, who tweeted out, from the Israeli Interior Minister, quote, "I authorized this humanitarian trip, but it turns out that it was a provocation to embarrass Israel. Her hatred for Israel overcomes her love for her grandmother." And there is a lot of criticism from the right saying that she would much rather take an ideological stance and reject something she just asked for to make a point, instead of going and visiting her family. But I do think it's fair to point out, while I do think it's kind of weird that she would ask to go and then deny it, they wanted stipulations. You can't, advocate for the boycott against Israel, and she said she wouldn't, but then later changed her mind. And I think it's always fair to point out, whatever her initial position was, she's refusing to bend the knee. It's complicated, but I think it's fair to point out that perspective, that she says she doesn't want to remain silent, and that's kind of a stipulation, so she rejected that outright. It does say, however, that her political or ideological stance on the conflict is more important than her going to visit her grandmother. You can think that's a good or a bad thing. I'm not saying you should have an opinion. I'm just letting you know, that is fairly apparent. So let's do this. I have the Daily Wire pulled up, but I do have a bunch of other sources I want to go through and kind of break down how I do sort of come down on the side that I think they were trying to prove a point with everything they did. And one of the things that leads me to believe this is in an itinerary that was published for their trip, they didn't say they were going to Israel. They said they were going to Palestine, even though their trip included going to parts of Israel. In which case, it seems like they were making a direct political jab at Israel with this trip. So it's no surprise then they're getting, they weren't allowed in. The whole thing is complicated. Okay, so I know I wanted to make sure I hit that point with the Israeli minister. Let's read this story. But as you know, we're talking about Israel, Palestine. We're going to be deranked, demonetized here. So if you want to support my work, go to timcast.com/donate. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address. But of course, the best thing you can do is just share this video because of all the things you can't talk about, Israel, Palestine is probably one of them. And I know I'm probably going to get heat from people on the left and the right of this issue, very pro-Israel people, very pro-Palestine people. Every time I talk about this, I get inundated with messages about how I'm right, about how I'm wrong no matter what I talk about. And I have very pro-Palestine people on the left who come at me saying I have no idea what I'm talking about. And I'm just like, listen, I know. I'm not trying to weigh in on which side is better or worse or anything like that. But I will stress, don't be surprised if you get the boot, your refused entry into Israel because you called it Palestine on multiple occasions, and you promote a movement which wants to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel, which is not, look, there is one Jewish state in this world, and it is within conflict. So it's a complicated issue, but and I let's go through the news because I don't want to get too far without actually providing you the context. So, from the Daily Wire, Israel grants Rashida Tlaib's request to visit the country. She declines. They report Rashida Tlaib announced on Friday that she would not be traveling to the state of Israel only hours after the Israeli government approved her special request to visit her family in the West Bank. She said, "My city wants to pick figs with me. I broke down reading this and worry every single day after I won for my family's safety. My cousin was texting me which photo of Omar and I they should put on a welcoming poster when I heard the news. I couldn't tell her, but she was approved." She says, "When I won, I gave the Palestinian people hope that someone will finally speak the truth about the inhumane conditions," she continued. "I can't allow the state of Israel to take away that light by humiliating me and use my love for my city to bow down to their oppressive and racist policies." Now, here's the thing. She actually sent a letter. And so this is what I find very confusing. And I'm trying to be as delicate as possible, so please understand. She sent a letter saying, "Please let me visit my family." Israel said yes. Now, I do think we're in a difficult position where she has to go to Israel in the first place to then try and go to the West Bank. But you've got to understand the reality of a conflict that's been longstanding for decades. And I'm not saying one side's right or wrong, but this is the situation, all right? I don't know what to tell you, and I'm not a scholar on these issues. So if you want to make a political point and reject them saying, by all means, go visit your family, you're free to do so. Here's what we have from Noah Landau of, they say they're covering Netanyahu for Haaretz. Breaking. Israel's interior minister just approved Rashida Tlaib's petition to enter Israel on humanitarian grounds to visit her Palestinian grandmother at the West Bank. She had to promise not to promote BDS during the visit. And we have this image. It's actually quite hard to see. So I'll zoom in a little bit. It says, Rashida Tlaib wrote this letter to the Honorable Aryeh Deri, Minister of the Interior. "I would like to request admittance to Israel in order to visit my relatives, and specifically my grandmother, who is in her 90s and lives in Beit Ur al-Fokwa. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it right. This could be my last opportunity to see her. I will respect any restrictions and will not promote boycotts against Israel during my visit." Whether or not you think she should or shouldn't be allowed to do that, I actually lean towards, I think she should be allowed to speak. I absolutely do. I understand Israel is in a conflict, and I understand, this is why I brought up initially that there are many countries that ban you from entering if you've ever been to Israel. It's not black or white. It's nuanced, and Israel is trying to do its best to protect itself. There's a lot to criticize Israel for. I believe in free speech, absolutely. I don't mean like an absolute free speech. I believe there are certain restrictions for sure. But I think she should have been let in and let her come and let her speak and challenge it and prove it. But I'm not Israel, okay? And I'm not Israeli, so I don't know what's best for them. I just lean more towards let people express themselves. But however, Rashida Tlaib said she was going to, not talk about BDS, just want to see her family. And Israel said no problem. Well, then we get this story. Tlaib cancels trip after Israel says she can come visit grandmother. Congresswoman, "I can't allow the state of Israel to take away that light by humiliating me and use my love for my city to bow down to their oppressive and racist policies." Look, I respect that some people can change their mind and that she initially agreed to it and then changed her mind. But I gotta say, I kind of feel like she assumed they were going to say no, like they were going to reject her outright, and then she'd be able to be like, "Look, they won't let me see my city." I think I'm pronouncing that right. Because then as soon as they agree, she goes, "No, I will not bow." It's like, well, you sent the letter already. Like you agreed, we're going to go visit your family, and I also think whether or not you think it's good or bad, she's erring on the side of ideology in the political fight versus going and seeing her family. I really do think you can see your family and maintain your integrity and honor. And I actually think she could have made a point about this after the fact. So I kind of don't understand her mentality. And that's why I think in the end, everything that Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib have done has been to the detriment of what's happening in Israel and Palestine. If she had gone, visit her family, and then came back and said that the only way she was able to see her grandmother was to agree to speech restrictions, and that in order to get to the West Bank, she had to go through Israel, that would have been a powerful point. Instead, This is why I feel like she had no intention of actually going in the first place. It really does feel like it was some people have called it a publicity stunt. I don't want to. I think I'm trying to be delicate again. Publicity stunt, whatever you want to call it. I think it was about highlighting some political situation. I don't think her intention was to go there and legitimately visit Israel and then visit Palestine. And there's a lot of reasons why that may be the case. So James J. Zogby said, "This is both heartbreaking and infuriating. Rashida Tlaib will not be traveling to occupied Palestinian lands. The humiliating treatment she received is dealt out by Israel to Arab Americans who travel attempt to enter and to Palestinians every single day. Will Congress act?" Now, this is the statement from Rashida Tlaib, where we have the gist of it. She said, you know, to be fair, let's actually read it, okay? So it's for immediate release from Congresswoman Tlaib's statement to Palestine Israel. She said, "In my attempt to visit Palestine, I've experienced the same racist treatment that many Palestinian Americans endure when encountering the Israeli government. In preparation for my visit, my grandmother was deciding which fig tree we would pick from together. While Palestinians and Israelis who are against the illegal military occupation were looking forward to members of Congress finally listening to and seeing them for the first time. The Israeli government used my love and desire to see my grandmother to silence me and made my ability to do so contingent upon my signing a letter. Reflecting just how undemocratic and afraid they are of the truth, my trip would reveal about what is happening in the state of Israel and to Palestinians living under occupation with United States support. Quote, I have therefore decided to not travel to Palestine and Israel at this time. Visiting my grandmother under these oppressive conditions meant to humiliate me would break my grandmother's heart. Silencing me with treatment to make me feel less than is not what she wants from me. It would kill a piece of me that always stands up against racism and injustice." She then goes on to make statements, which I have gone through in the past. But here's the thing. Let's talk about good faith versus bad faith. In the culture where we often hear that people are operating in bad faith, that's all they ever say. They accuse me of operating in bad faith, and I am milquetoast, fence sitter, tepid, lukewarm, all of these things. And I'm like, I'm not even here. Like, I've actually provided defense to Tlaib's position. She doesn't want to bow to Israel in order to visit her grandmother. I kind of disagree with how she's going about it. Don't necessarily trust her. I think it may be an instance of bad faith. And now I'll show you exactly why. In this post from Harry Kachatrian, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, he is a Daily Wire contributor, he says, according to their own itinerary, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib chose to refer to Israel as Palestine. Their trip there was little more than a self-indulgent ploy to delegitimize and malign the Jewish state from within its borders. While I'm not going to make any, I'm not going to justify his opinion following the statement, I will point out, according to this, assuming it's true, I mean, he's a verified Daily Wire contributor, U.S. congressional delegation to Palestine, August 18th to the 22nd, tentative agenda. Assuming this is their actual agenda, yeah, they said they were planning to visit Palestine with their arrival being to Tel Aviv. I understand that you have to go through Israel for this to happen, but I think it's not... Look, man, there is a conflict happening. No one is happy about what's happening. You've got people on both sides who are very much at odds. You've got organizations that are are digging tunnels into Israel. They're being captured with weapons. You've got Israel retaliating and doing airstrikes in Palestine. It is not a simple circumstance. Certainly putting out a delegation, an itinerary that calls Israel Palestine is the opposite of building peace and trying to solve this problem. So that's why I err on the side of I really do not see this as genuine. It seems like they wanted Israel to put up roadblocks. They wanted this to happen. They got what they wanted, and now they can point the finger and blame Israel. And look, there's a couple other things I'll go through, but come on, man. I understand there's a conflict, but doing things like this does not solve the problem. This story from January. Israel relabeled as Palestine on map in Rashida Tlaib's office. And this is from forward.com. This was considered controversial. A change was made to the map. Let me zoom in a little bit. A change was made to the map in Rashida Tlaib's office the day she was sworn into Congress. A post-it note smacked next to Israel pointing to Palestine. Tlaib of Michigan, a Palestinian American, was one of the first two Muslim women to take her seat in the House, and she shared her heritage proudly. She took her oath on a special Quran, on a 1734 English translation that belonged to Thomas Jefferson. That's incredible, by the way. That is absolutely incredible. Thomas Jefferson, for all the faults of the past, was a very, very great individual. And the fact that he had a Quran just shows that he was open-minded and intelligent. And that's, I gotta say, I'm really inspired by the fact that she was able to swear an oath on a special Quran that belonged to Thomas Jefferson. That's awesome stuff, right? America is amazing. I'm just gonna leave it there. Not a day goes by there's not something about America that I find truly inspirational. Granted, there's things to criticize America for, but that's awesome, man. And wore a red embroidered thobe, a traditional Palestinian gown. She has been vocal about her support of the BDS movement against Israel. Despite her views, she didn't stick the note on her map. Among her entourage, a Palestinian-American comedian, Mo Amer, saw the map and added the post-it note. I'm trying to make sure, Forward, my understanding is quite progressive. This has been very controversial. I'm trying to be delicate. I'll say it for the third time. She didn't do this, but, right? It's an issue of, how she goes about these things. And in the photos where, they have this, is everything being done to try and solve the problem? And I think the answer is no. I think what's happening is things are actually being made worse. If you're going to put out an itinerary, again, assuming this is real, that refers to Israel as Palestine, well, you're literally taking a hard ideological stance in a situation that is absurdly delicate and is every couple of years there's a massive military conflict between, the Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel. And there's a lot to criticize Israel for. Conservatives know this, and it's amazing to me that I've seen videos from conservatives where they point out the bad things that Israel does. The West Bank settlements is the most notable. But what they're going about doing, the statements she's putting out, look, I can absolutely respect refusing to bend the knee. 100% I respect that. So Rashida Tlaib, you have my respect. I believe you have a right to speak. I don't believe you should have been barred. I don't agree. If somebody wants to talk about BDS, fine. At the same time, Israel is going to do what Israel thinks is right, and especially when you recognize there are a ton of countries that will ban you for simply going there. There is no simple solution to this, and I just see this whole thing as bad for the entirety of it. I have no idea what to say to anybody, to be like, how can we solve this problem and get people to live peacefully? Because there are absolutely dozens of countries that want Israel to be eradicated, and that's not a solution. Genocide is not a solution. The obliteration of the Israeli state is not a solution. So I don't know what to tell you. I will say all of this just comes off as in my opinion, bad faith and making things worse. Ocasio-Cortez chimed in the other day saying, Netanyahu's discriminatory decision to ban members of Congress from Israel harms international diplomacy. Visiting Israel and Palestine are key experiences towards a path to peace. Sadly, I cannot move forward with scheduling any visits to Israel until all members of Congress are allowed to. Well, it would make sense if you want to go to Israel if you referred to it as such. Look, man, I have worked on stories where we are trying to plan a trip into Gaza, and it is incredibly difficult because of the Israeli government. I understand. I get it. It is a conflict. There are people who are, there's a video the other day, I think, of somebody trying to stab a cop or something. We see these stories. It is not an easy situation. Oftentimes, I feel like the only reason the sentiment is so harshly anti-Israel is because Israel receives support from the U.S. and is more powerful. Right? The conflict didn't start with Israel just dominating everything. But right now, Israel has the defense. They have the Iron Dome. They have support. They have financing. They have technological development. They produce a lot of, I believe, logistical weapons support kind of stuff, technologies. And this gives them a major advantage in this conflict. I don't know how to tell you who's right or wrong in any war. You've got ideologies on both sides. I really don't. I can tell you that when you have certain groups hole up in schools or hospitals and then fire rockets into Israel, going over Tel Aviv, you're not solving any problems. I don't know what the goal there is other than to make things worse. And then Israel retaliates. And you see these memes, and I got man, let this be my Tim Pool's centrist opinion time on what I see when trying to deal with what's happening with the Israel-Palestine conflict. People on the left will show comics and memes of a little rocket fizzling out and crashing, and then the IDF just dropping a barrage of bombs. and like making it seem like it was so disproportionate and unfair that Israel retaliated in this way. Maybe. I'm not saying it's not. You'll see on the right, they'll show like cameras pointed at Israel. When the rockets start flying in from Gaza, the cameras are like pointed down, and then the camera points up as soon as Israel fires back. So it's like, look, I don't know what the solution is. I can tell you this. Referring to Israel as Palestine, asking to visit your family, and then immediately turning around and rejecting it, these are not things that are going to make anything better. And so I'm not surprised that you've got harsh criticism from conservatives towards Rashida Tlaib over how she handled this. I can respect her refusal to bend the knee. You know, people who are Palestinian, she should have a right to visit her family in the West Bank, and she should be allowed to speak. I believe freedom of speech is a universal right. So I disagree with Israel on this one, 100%. Well, I shouldn't say 100% because I recognize, man, I don't know enough about what's going on, but I do believe they should let her in, man. You know, it's complicated. I know a lot of conservatives disagree, putting out pieces saying they were absolutely right to bar her. The BDS would be the destruction of the Israeli state and all that stuff. I'll admit, my position is fairly left libertarian spectrum. And that means I recognize that this is hard mode in life, the hardest political position. Because I recognize if I'm going to respect free speech, it's going to be for someone who's going to be preaching about things that would be harmful to Israel. And I know that Israel is dealing with all of these countries that want to blow it off the face of the planet. So Israel has to put a limit. You know, I disagree. And it's one of the biggest ethical, moral, and philosophical conundrums I've experienced. Because you see these memes put out, these comics where they're like, you can't tolerate intolerance. And they say, when you tolerate intolerance, there's that comic, I don't know if you've seen it, talking about Nazis, where it says, if you tolerate the intolerant, eventually they take over and then you lose tolerance. And I'm like, man, it doesn't make sense. Look, I do understand that Israel is trying to not give a space to anyone who would advocate for its destruction. I saw a story the other day that parts of Europe or like certain jurisdictions are going to start labeling Israeli products. And I'm like, that is a horrible idea. Wow, don't put like the Israeli flag on a product. Wow, that's just, no. I don't have that pulled up, so take it with a grain of salt. Fact check me on that one. But I will stress, I understand. If they allow her to go in and preach BDS and go to Palestine, it could make things worse. But I believe in free speech, and I believe Israel has to uphold freedom and liberty to be that symbol in the Middle East and prove that they are worth, having their rights, their freedom, their existence by saying, we'll let you speak. But you know what? I'll end with this final thought because I'm surprised I was able to talk about this as long as I did. I really, really just don't know enough, man. I'm not an expert. I understand, I understand things are complicated. It's hard to know for sure what the right thing to do is. I understand that Rashida Tlaib has her family basically in a place it's very difficult for her to get to. And if I wanted to go visit my family and I was told I could visit them so long as I don't say X, Y, or Z, I'll tell you what I'd do. I would say, okay, recognizing the power structure in place, I would go visit my family, I'd give them hugs, I'd leave, and then I would blast the policy and say it is absurd that I had to do that, but family comes first, for the most part. Like there are certain circumstances. So I'll leave it there. There's gonna be a lot of criticism for her. I'm seeing it from a lot of people on the right that she puts her ideology above her family. I think that's actually what the statement was from the Israeli Interior Minister. Her hatred for Israel overcomes her love for her grandmother. But that's not, you could frame it that way, or we can just say it plain and simple. She does believe in the ideology and her political fight more than she cares about seeing her family. I'll tell you this now, people on the left probably are saying that's amazing that she's willing to take that sacrifice and not see her grandmother to stand up for what she believes in. And there are going to be people on the right who are going to be saying, how could you turn your back on your family over political squabbling? You could have gone and seen them and come out later. I don't know what to tell you, man. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment will be coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all there.